Welcome to the Over It, the Consciousness Transforming podcast for exceptional 21st century living. Folks, we have a very interesting show today on a topic that we don't cover that often. Today, we're going to be speaking with Brett Bevell, and we're going to be talking about his latest book, Healing Racism Within, a Lightworker's Guide. I met Brett back when he was promoting his Wizard's Guide to Healing Energy, and you can actually listen to the podcast on this network. And then I went over and I met him for his talk at East West Books, and we gave great hugs to each other. And he brought up something a little bit about race, and I was like, okay. But, we quickly let it go. He did a great presentation. And then later through the years, we talked about racism and, the spiritual aspect, if you will, the energy aspect, if you will. And he's put out this wonderful book, A Lightworker's Guide to Healing the Racism Within. Actually, that's kind of backwards. But if you're struggling with this concept, or if you think racism doesn't exist, this is a book for you to read. It's a quick read. Now, full disclosure, I was one of the people who endorsed it, so I'm very honored that he asked me to do that. But this book will help you heal what you may not even know that you need to heal. So we're going to delve into it more in a moment, but I just wanted to get that out there for now. Now, the information shared on Get Over It uses intuitive and pragmatic insight to help you shift your consciousness to break through the blocks and release energy that is no longer needed. Yes, we're going to help you let go of the BS that is holding you back. But you guys know I always ask that question, are you truly ready to? And by the way, folks, BS is belief system. A bit about me for my new listeners, intuitive since birth. I'm a third generation intuitive with over 3 decades of experience supporting people to break through the blocks along their path. I'm a strategist for personal and professional transformation, revealing cutting-edge information that enables you to prosper and thrive. I spent 25 successful years in corporate America as an executive sales professional, and I am the founder of Healing Visions Ministries and the Northern California Children's Education Network, a 501c3 nonprofit. I provide consultations and healings in all areas of life that heal the mind-body-spirit connection, allowing you to live your very best life. My clients tell me that I keep it real while providing them with accurate information to assist them along their journey as a spirit, not a client, but a spirit living a human existence. But they also say, if you really don't want to know, don't ask, Monique. My background includes a doctorate in metaphysics, Reiki Master teacher, ordained minister, and clinical hypnotherapist. So whether you are stressed, depressed, or possessed, I can help. To find out more about me and what I offer, go to my website, and that's MoniqueChapman.com. And I invite you to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. My guest today, Reiki Master Brett Bevell, is the author of several books, including Psychic Reiki and Reiki for Spiritual Healing. He teaches regularly at a premier holistic venues, including the Omega Institute in New York, and Healing Racism Within. Brett shares insights that were essential to his personal transformation, along with haunting stories from his childhood, including trauma, sexual abuse, and growing up within a racist community. And you can check him out on his website at brettbevell.com for everything that he offers. He's written many books, all of them equally well with helping people heal. And again, the website is brettbevell.com, and that's BRETTBEVELL.com. Welcome back, Brett.
Thank you for having me, Monique. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, it's always great to have you. Healing Racism Within, a Lightworker's Guide. Why and why now?
Yeah, so it feels to me that something I've really noticed in the energy healing world is, one, how incredibly powerful the tools are. When I look at my own story and the things that I've moved through, even just regarding my story around sexual abuse, the tools are very powerful. And I've often wondered, not just energy healing, but all the techniques that I see at places like Omega Institute and Kripalu and Esalen, these amazing ways to kind of shape shift the way that we're wired energetically and in our minds. Why not also start to address issues around race with that? Because my belief is that, racism is not just something that is embedded in the legal structure and in the organizational structures around our country and in our world, but it's also something that lives at the cellular level. It's something that lives in our auric field. It's something that lives in our energy body. So why not address that energetically? And also from my own story, I know the power that these tools can bring in terms of healing my own life with regards to my own racist conditioning. And certainly the events of the past year or two have shown us how much these wounds are still with us in this country.
Yes, it does. And I want you to let's go back to way back in the beginning. Let's talk about your childhood and how that shaped your views regarding race.
Sure. So, I mean, I lived in a very traumatic background. To be just very blunt about it, I was born into a family of murderers and pedophiles, and they were also racist. And I witnessed a race-based murder when I was a child. I also was often sent on fishing trips with my father's friend, who would often brag about having murdered a young Black boy many, many years before. So that's the environment that I grew up in. And in my own healing process from healing from my own sexual abuse issues, I really began to notice how similar the patterns were in terms of in the family systems, how there was this sense of silence around abuse. Don't talk about the abuse. Don't. And I started to notice how in society as a whole that there's very similar patterns around issues around race, that we're discouraged from really talking about it, really openly expressing our feelings about it, and that there's this tendency to just kind of want to look the other way and not really look it square in the eye and deal with it. So as I started to notice these patterns, I started to think, well, why not use the same tools that I'm using to heal from sexual abuse? Why not use those same tools to help rewire myself in terms of how I think about the world, and especially on issues of race, and to release that inherent generational misunderstanding and trauma that's there.
Okay. Now, folks, I really want you to understand that this book is not a white guilt book or anything like that. This is a personal story of a man who went through a transformation process. He doesn't hold back. He talked about the sexual abuse and I remember reading in the book about the murder that you talk about here on air, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's a wonder that when we met each other, if you hadn't done the work, I don't think we would have met each other. You would have completely ignored me
Yeah.
when, I came to your venue. I mean, so much healing has gone on with this. Now, you said that racism can be in the DNA. Is that why well, let me share a brief story. I grew up in
Sure.
Guilderland, New York, and every now in Guilderland is Dutch community, very upscale bedroom community, still is today. Um, if I missed the bus to high school, we would wait and take the elementary school bus because it eventually went to the bus garage, which was in a half a mile of the high school. And I remember, getting on, we'd sit way in the back seat of the bus, back seat of the bus. But we'd sit in the back seat of the bus, and the kids that were going to elementary school, they saw it was usually me and my cousin Brenda who lived next door. There were two Black figures, and they would not come more than halfway the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, what are they afraid of? It just kind of blew my mind. And then I remember in fourth, fifth, and sixth grades, in my classroom, we had to move our chairs every day, our desks, because somebody or many somebodies didn't want their little precious darling sitting next to the little dark girl. So
Mm-hmm.
is this how do we get past the DNA? I mean, it must be taught at some level in the household.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think we have to heal that ancestral lines that go back for generations. I have a similar story to share. I'm just going to interject real quick
Oh,
that
please do.
there's a movie that I've often shown to staff at Omega Institute, and it's not a movie that's really focused on issues of race. It's called What About Me? It was created by the folks at One Giant Leap, and it's this beautiful movie about awakening, and there's this beautiful music with musicians from all around the planet. And there's one segment that goes for about 15 minutes where all you're seeing are these beautiful villages in Africa, right? So pretty much everybody in about this 15-minute segment is Black. And what I noticed, I've shown this film about 30 times, right? And I noticed that always during that segment of the film, there would be a middle-aged white woman in the room that would get up and walk out.
Ooh.
It wasn't the same middle-aged woman each time. It was a different woman
Ah.
each time, but every time, like almost like on cue, a white middle-aged woman would get out of the room and walk out during that 15-minute segment. And I often thought, because these weren't people who I would necessarily think of as being racist, but I started to think, what's going on in our collective conditioning that was triggering that group of women to need to feel like they had to exit the theater at that point,
That particular time.
repeatedly. So I started to feel like there's this collective conditioning that we're all immersed in that I think many of us are not even conscious of on many levels.
Well, here comes my prejudice. It must have been the Karens of the world. I mean, it's unfortunate. And for those who are truly named Karen by their parents, my apologies. Okay, so you wrote this book, this beautiful book, and you wrote it and released it now. I mean, when Trump was running for office, that was a horrifying time for me and many Black people, although he does have Black supporters. I want to put that out there. All of his negative traits, just as a human being, forget being president of the United States, but the traits of the human being, it seemed to bring up a lot of the lower vibrational energies. I have had a record year in doing spirit depossessions where there's truly, these evil spirits or negative spirits that attached. So why now? Why this book at this particular juncture in time?
Yeah, so I just feel like it's a time when we need to do our work. I think often I think certainly there's a collective energy that I think is doing wonderful work in terms of externally, in terms of organizing and doing the work that needs to happen on the ground to change the rules, change the laws that happen in our corporations, in our governments, in our institutions. But even in that, in my own family, which was very split because my parents were divorced when I was 5, and on my mother's side, they on the outside seemed like they were really liberal and very progressive, but on the inside there was all this mess. And so what I've noticed and what I've seen is sometimes even those people who might on the external level seem like they're really working for the light still need to do their inner work. And I also noticed that years later when I did my master's thesis, which was really kind of the first sort of spawning of this book many years ago in the late 1990s, I would be reading poems as part of my master's thesis around having witnessed that race-based murder when I was a child. And even though my master's thesis went fine, when I would read those poems in certain open mics in the Bay Area, I ended up getting blacklisted from certain readings and people calling me a white trash poet and this total censorship going on just because I was talking about something that was evil, but I was just my belief is, you shed light on it, and that's how you dissipate that kind of activity. So I was just simply shedding light on something horrible that had happened, and people didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want me to talk about it.
Interesting, because the Bay Area can be pretty liberal and willing to listen to all sides, and but it's also a very interesting place when it comes to race. Now, you talk about the purpose of expressing multicultural gratitude. What is it, and how do we express it?
So one thing I've noticed over the years is, how just a simple gratitude practice can really help rewire the brain. And so one of the exercises in the book is what I call multicultural gratitude, where a person will specifically write down 20 things per day that they are grateful for that exist outside of the lens of their specific culture. And the intent of that is to try to rewire the brain to be more embracing, more grateful, more accepting of people who look other than us. And one thing that I find really interesting is that when I first started doing that exercise, I would get tired. And I to me, that's just another demonstration of what I call these kind of psychic grooves, or you think of like the morphogenetic field of 500 years of racism is like this invisible wall that exists around us that says, don't be grateful for that culture, or don't be grateful for this person who looks different than you. And I really had to pay attention to that as I would do this exercise, I was coming up against what I felt like was an invisible psychic wall that was
Mm-hmm.
pushing back on me and making me actually extremely tired as I would do these exercises. And I no longer feel that sense anymore. I feel like I've moved through that. But for me, it was just another example of how much an energetic aspect of this racial equation is important for us to look at, because I think there's all kinds of invisible things that we aren't even aware of that we need to take a look at. And that's one of them.
Okay. In your book, you share something that was kind of like near and dear to my heart because we kind of went through the same experience, but I wasn't working there. You talk about working at Quickway. And
Mhm.
Quickway, for those that you don't know, was a chain of restaurants in Oakland, California. And they had one on East 14th Street near 61st. Might have been 62nd, a block up. I don't exactly remember, but my husband's niece at the time lived around the corner from that, next door to the Black Panther school. So that was interesting within itself. And then you also worked at their downtown location. And Quickway was cheap fried chicken and fries. I mean, for what, $1.50 or something like that, you get a half a chicken and a basket of fries. Greasy, but fantastically good. Okay. Um, and you share an experience of working there and not being accepted. And I would go as a customer and not be accepted. So why do you think that was? You were a white man and you're working, especially on the 61st Street store. It was predominantly Black and poor, but I was a Black woman and I had the same
Huh.
issues and feelings that you did. So
Wow.
explain to the people how well, you can give them more of that background if you want, and how you felt in that environment as being the only white guy.
Sure. I mean, for me, as the only white guy, a lot of it was right during the first Persian Gulf War,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot what I was feeling and what I would hear verbally too was just a sense of resentment. People saying like, "Hey, it's our sons that are going to fight this war. It's not people that look like you." And I was actually against the war, but that didn't seem to matter. But I would just feel a lot of anger at me as I was serving the customers, and not so much from the coworkers, but really
Mm-hmm.
feeling it from the customers
Mm-hmm.
intently. And I could also, identify with it in the sense that I agreed with some of what they were saying. But I just felt very much like I was uh, the person who was the object of their anger. And even though I agreed with the anger on some level, feeling that sense of kind of like an energetic sludge around myself each day as I would go home. And I also started to wonder in that, if that's also what people of color feel on a larger scale all the time, in terms of, especially if they're living in communities where there's a lot of racial hatred. Are they having that kind of experience all the time? Whereas for me as a white man, I was experiencing it during that short time while I was there
Mm-hmm.
working, which was for several months. But I think even though it was an unpleasant experience, I think it also opened my heart to a sense of compassion for people who experience that every day, regardless of where they're working, regardless of where they're living. Um, One other thing that was important in my own evolution while I was working there, there was one time I was sent to a certain location that my manager, who was a Black woman, uh,
Mm-hmm.
said I had to go to this other location for a late night shift because they needed somebody. And I remember she gave me a $20 bill and told me to take a cab home.
Mm-hmm.
When I took the bus there, I was okay on the bus. When I was at the location, it was very wild. There were kids like throwing milkshakes against the bulletproof window and stuff. And in my own mind, I also kept thinking, yeah, this feels kind of crazy, but at the same time, if these were white kids throwing milkshakes at a window, would I feel like I needed to take a cab home? And so I actually didn't take a cab home that night. I remember just
Mm-hmm.
going out and sitting at the bus stop and just paying attention to my breathing and just kind of watching the lights,
Mm-hmm.
and just tuning into spirit or God, if you want to think of it that way, and just feeling like, these are just other people. I don't feel any direct threat. In my own personal life, I've been abused, sexually abused, violated by people who were white. I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel afraid when a white person is crossing the street next to me. So why am I projecting all this onto people who are Black? Why do I feel like I should feel afraid, in a Black neighborhood, even if it may feel a little bit wild? And so in that night, I felt like it was a real important step for me in my own evolution. Like, I don't need to take a cab home. There's other people who are riding the bus, and I'll ride the bus with them.
And
And
pocket
so
that $18.
well, no, I actually gave the $20 back to May
Oh,
when
okay.
I got there the next day. I just
Hmm.
told her that I took the bus. And so it was just an important lesson for me, I feel.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because she was asking you to go into a situation which she felt may be dangerous for you later on, but she was also
Yeah.
offering a way of protection at the
Yeah.
same time. And you just decided to be you and step right out there. So, I mean, how can you get better than that by just being yourself?
Yeah.
You just can't. Folks, we're speaking with Brett Bevell. We're talking about his latest book, Healing Racism Within, a Lightworker's Guide. You can check him out at his website. That's brettbevell.com, BRETTBEVELL.com. Brett, folks, is a fantastic Reiki master. I'm a Reiki master teacher, but Brett, I think he's like the king of them all. His transmissions are extremely strong, whether in person or virtually, whatever. When I did go to the talk that he was at, I saw three of my Reiki students there, and I was like, yay, because I'm glad you're able to reach out and connect with Brett. So, Brett, how did your Reiki training help you heal the trauma of this racial conditioning that we're all going through?
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, I think with even just the attunements in Reiki, that it changes your energetic vibration. And when I was getting my first attunement, I think that really helped me in coping with a lot of the memories that I had as a child. Not just about the murder I had witnessed. That
Hmm.
was important. In terms of the emotional baggage that I was carrying. A lot of it was released shortly after my first degree attunement. And
Hmm.
then also just in terms of my own, sexual abuse issues, I was also releasing a lot of that. But for me, your vibration is getting higher and higher with each attunement. So that's just the attunement alone. But also doing the self healings, helping to relax the mind, relax the nervous system, relax the brain, allows one to tune in at a deeper level. But at the
Hmm.
second degree is where I think it really gets more important, because there's a symbol there for mental emotional healing. And I really, I encourage anybody who's attuned already to the second degree of Reiki to just make a practice, even if it's once a week, of just doing a session on yourself where you're intending to use that mental emotional symbol to work on any conditioning that you might have, that you're
Hmm.
conscious of or unconscious of, that may have to do with issues around race, to help release that conditioning. And in my own evolution with Reiki, I've also developed some techniques that are beyond traditional training, something I call psychic Reiki. And
Hmm.
in the book, we explore how to use these psychic Reiki techniques to clear the ancestral lines, to clear the negative conditioning we may have received from our grandparents or great grandparents, or release any trauma that's there. There's also a way you can use what's called the Reiki crystal, which is an energetic crystal made out of the light of Reiki, to bring you into a deep Reiki meditation, to just ask it to bring into your awareness
Hmm.
anything that may be that you're biased to or blind to, that you need to look at. And so you can use it in that way as well. So there's certainly a lot of ways that you can use Reiki to help shift what's going on with the kind of conditioning that lives in our emotional bodies, our mental bodies, and even in our karmic bodies regarding issues around race.
Yeah, and you know what, folks? It doesn't matter what color, stripe, whatever you are. There's always something for all of us to be working on regarding people who appear to be different from us. Because it's just a shell. I mean, once we leave Earth, our soul goes to wherever it's going to go. But we have a certain shell while we're here, and we've come in to learn certain lessons within that shell. And I think the biggest one is, it's like love and compassion. Look at everything that Brett has gone through. I mean, to be a young child, I think you were 10, right, when you witnessed the murder? And I mean, that had to be horrific because I went through something at 16 where, eh, well, long story short, I saw a body being placed in a garbage can. Didn't see the murder, but saw the body placed in, and sometimes even still today, and I'm damn near 70, it's like, whoa, I haven't healed that yet. I'm working with it with your techniques, but how do you truly just get past the energy of like seeing that and the mixed emotions of feeling? It just it seems hard. So is there like one technique in your book that you use that was more pronounced than the others to help you process that?
I mean, really, I mean, for me, even though the book has a number of techniques ranging
Hmm.
from Tonglen Buddhist meditations to the gratitude work to art therapy work, for me, it's really been the energy healing that I feel has cleared my energetic body the most. So
Hmm.
really going and just making a very committed practice of always trying to work on those mental, emotional issues that I feel are existing in myself,
Hmm.
also working on the karmic body to work on clearing the karma of my ancestors as well, including my parents.
Hmm.
So that's certainly been an important part of it. I do have to just say, in terms of that specific the murder that I witnessed, it was actually when I was a toddler.
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and a big part of the healing with that happened during my master's thesis, where
Hmm.
my master's thesis was basically a ritual that involved me reciting poetry about that issue, also doing an honoring of the spirit of the person who had been murdered, so doing kind of a ritual with sound and candles, and then also following that by attuning everybody in the audience to Reiki and asking them to bring that light out into the world in honor of that person whose life had been taken. And I
Hmm.
really felt like that ritual was probably worth thousands of dollars of therapy for me. I literally had a hard time talking for the next 3 weeks because I felt like my brain was being so radically rewired by the
Hmm.
power of that event that it was, even though I tend to be really good with my words as a writer and stuff, I would have a hard time just simply saying the most basic things because my brain was going through such a radical transformation.
Hmm.
But again, if I had to pick any one thing, I would say it's been energy healing, Reiki, and other forms of energy healing that have really radically transformed that space for me, and just allowing me to get again just reawaken into that space of once you clear your energetic filters of that trauma, of that pain, then you can get back into seeing that place of the oneness of everything. But I think it's important to pay attention to actually clearing those pains and traumas first, rather than
Hmm.
trying to just spiritually bypass it and just saying, oh, we're all one, I don't need to look at the pain and trauma. I think
Yeah,
you do
no,
need to look at the pain and trauma. I think that's
yeah.
important to move
That
it.
that that's where our work is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking, intuitively I received some information that as you were working through your healing, the person who was murdered received a healing and forgiveness was offered. I mean, like, wow, so not only do we work on ourselves, we work, past and present, but we can even affect others in their lineage. So
Yeah.
great, great job. Book, you talk about the Maharishi effect. What is that?
So the Maharishi effect is based on an experiment that was done with some people from Maharishi University, which is trained by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, where they would meditate on certain cities in the U.S. and they would literally visualize the crime rate going down. I believe one of the cities
Hmm.
that they tracked this in was in Washington D.C., where they would meditate on certain specific days, and they started to literally track the statistics, and that went during those times when they were meditating and seeing more peace and trying to bring the crime rate down in those cities, that the crime
Hmm.
rate actually went down. So it's this idea that energetically, whether it's through prayer, meditation, energy healing, ritual, other forms of just putting energy out into the world, that a group of individuals can impact the collective whole through meditation, prayer, and energetic work. So I
Does it have
believe
to be a large group?
it doesn't have to be a large group, no. So I think as people who are aligned with this work start to do more and more work on themselves, and also send healing out into the world, send healing to dissolve those energetic walls that exist between us, that I do believe it will have a greater impact on society as a whole in a very positive way.
Boy, we need to get together and do some work on each and every state, but maybe Washington, D.C. to start and go outward from there. Because we're in trouble. People don't realize. I mean, forget the politics and all that. I mean, we've got the air to worry about, the lack of water. It's just crazy how we've, I don't know, killed Mother Earth or almost killed her, but now we want to go to Mars and start all over again. We haven't learned the lessons of Earth, but that's a whole different show. You talk about the wound that we cannot see. What is that?
So to me, the wound we cannot see is that 500 plus years of colonial pain and trauma that I think specifically as a white person, my experience is that for many years I didn't see it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's many people who who I've known on my own journey who will still often just have the blinders on and not want
Mm-hmm.
to look at it. When I really first saw it actually was when I started getting banned as a poet in the late
Mm-hmm.
1990s, and I realized all these poets who on the outside seemed very progressive, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
seemed, they would often want to be quoting Martin Luther King and Malcolm X in their poems, but yet there was this sense of like, we don't want to look at the pain of what you're talking about in your poetry. That's what they were saying to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started to wonder, well, what's that really about? Is there some greater wound? Like, when we look at our ancestors, right? When we look at the pain of genocide, of the rape and trauma that happened for slaves over
Mm-hmm.
many, many generations. When we look at that and we realize, well, who did that? I'm not saying that every white person's ancestors did that, but collectively, as a whole, as a society, we did that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an energetic wound there. There's a I don't want to say the word guilt because I think that can get too messy and too guilt ridden. But I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a pain there that we should look at and that we should digest it and that we should honor it and find ways to transmute it and transform it and get beyond it so that we can then come into a place of acknowledging what happened in the past and also doing whatever kind of whatever we need to do to rectify that. So,
Mm-hmm.
in my own journey as a healer, I've found that that really owning your stuff is important, right? Uh,
Yeah.
owning up to your faults is important. So for me, I think it's important to own up to the faults of my ancestors and to try to make amends for that in whatever way I can. And so I feel that collectively as a society, I feel that we haven't done that and that it's important work for us to do.
I agree. And folks, he's just not talking about faults of ancestors on the white side, okay? It was very prevalent in the Black community for the older Black men to rape the young girls, whether it was their child, their niece, their grandchild. And unfortunately, it still goes on today. It's not as prevalent as it was, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but it's still out there, okay? Know from personal experience, it's still out there. So please don't take the information being shared today as, white bashing or white shaming, because it's not. It's for all of us to have an understanding and to move forward from. Um, what benefit do you think people will get out of reading this book? And folks, it's a short read. You can read it in a day. You'll need more time to go back and do the exercises, of course, and they're worth doing because it allows you to look at yourself. But Brett, what benefit do you feel people will get from at least ingesting the words?
Yeah, well, I think certainly the benefit of there's a number of different tools. I intentionally, even though my primary focus is energy healing, there's a lot of different ways that one can engage this book, from different art therapy tools to meditation tools, and again, energy work tools. So I think certainly getting a bag of tools with which to start to chip away at the energetic conditioning that I think we are all collectively subject to. I often
Mm-hmm.
like to use the analogy of like pollution, right? I feel like that racism is kind of like an energetic pollution that exists in our society. And no matter where you live today, right? Whatever water you're drinking, that water probably has some plastic in it. It probably has some
Mm-hmm.
that are not too good for you. And I think the same is true in terms of wherever we were raised, no matter what color we are, that our society has been polluted with toxic racist beliefs and concepts, and that this book gives us the tools to help filter out and release that from our consciousness so that we can be better human beings, and so that we can hopefully create a better world for our kids and for future generations.
Yeah, folks, it's all about letting go of the BS, and that is belief system. Brett, it's been a delight having you. What pearl of wisdom would you like to offer the audience today?
Just that we all have a light that exists inside of us, and to just let it shine, let your light shine. And that also includes helping to release any barriers that are inhibiting that light. So just let your light be bright and let it shine.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, folks. We've been speaking with Brett Bevell. His latest book is Healing Racism Within, a Lightworker's Guide. Go to his website. You'll get all information on his other books and the work that he's doing. If you're in the New York area and you want to take classes with him or, be in his presence, do, because it is life changing. Okay, life changing. Brett, I never told you this, but I'm going to share this with you. When I was on the way over to your book, I had a panic attack out of nowhere. I'm driving down 880, crossing 237. I had to pull over to the side of the road and wait until it passed. And then once I was in your presence and you hugged me and we talked very briefly before your talk, everything just calmed down. And I don't think you knew that, like, I was going crazy inside when I first talked to you, but it was interesting. But folks, this interview is truly healing. So thank you, Brett, from the bottom of my heart. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you again for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem. You're welcome back anytime. And folks, who are listening, I am truly honored and I appreciate your time and attention. So thank you for tuning in. And everybody, please remember that the most important choice that you can make is what you choose to make important. Consider making the masterful choice of healing racism within. Abundant blessings, light, and love to all. Agape.